Good evening and welcome to tonight's shir. It's Thursday night of Parshas Vayelech, Shabbos Shuvah, and sponsored tonight is in honor of the baby boy born to Shaya and Edel Mushka Zirkin. She's a daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Pinchas Rabin of Edgware. So mazel tov to the grandparents who's paid the sponsorship. And Bashkocha Protest, as last week we had they sponsored in honor of the Yortzeit of Mr. Joe Taylor of Sholem on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. And on the eve of the second day of Rosh Hashanah was born this Enochel, or Enochel. We're not going to guess the name, but right, let's just go on to our shir, but wish them Society Brisbit of Esmano and should be brought up by the parents, Gesundheit, Erich Yom Shalom Teves, Yiddish Nachas, Chassidus Nachas. Right, so now we got our first question for tonight, and that was put to me. Someone had asked someone else and got a different answer. So here's the story. There is a halacha, it says in the Gemara in Menachos, something called Heker Tzir. When you have a dilemma, which way to put the mezuzah, because you're meant to put the mezuzah on the right as you enter. And there the story in the Gemara is you have two adjacent rooms. One is, and they're both open to the street. One is a man's, one's the woman's. And now there's a door between them. So which way is the sense of direction? And the Gemara says, look which way the door swings. The one where the door swings into, that's the interior. As we discussed it a couple of weeks ago in context of also a sliding door. So here's the question, as you see on the, you can see it on the screen. And we have here a door which is not more than about, let's say, I don't know, 40, 50 centimeters high. So does that door count as a door to define sense of direction? So my reaction was that that doesn't count as a door. But someone else at Paskin, it does. Okay, fine. So then I didn't find the answer to this written clearly, but there is another question. There's the Shitas Rambam that you only put up a mezuzah, I mean, HaTorah is only if there is a door. A doorway without a door, according to the Rambam, a door or a gate, according to the Rambam, is potem mezuzah. So this is a contemporary sefer, Shari HaMezuzah from Rav Shmuel Yosef Shtitzberg. So he says there are those who say that the door, to define that it's obliged to have a mezuzah according to the Rambam, has to be at least 10 tefachim high. So sometimes you have what they call a barn door or something, where you've got a half door. So not always does the door go all the way up. But he's quoting from various other Sforim, also contemporary Sforim, that it's at least 10 tefachim. Because you see what is a door? A door is a mechitza. It's a kind of a mechitza which can be open and closed, but it's a barrier. And let's say in the halachas of Eruv, a wall which is less than 10 tefachim high is not a wall. It doesn't exist. So because it's easy to step over. So a door which is less than 10 tefachim is, by that same svara, less than 10 tefachim should not be counted as a door, and therefore it does not have any, well, that's therefore according to the Rambam, that doesn't make it chayav mezuzah, and I'm taking that also, that the door with the hinges and everything, if it's less than 10 tefachim, is not a door to have any bearing la halacha. Okay, let's go on to our next point. I don't think we have a slide for that, but here's the oh, yeah, I think we do actually. Yeah, so here's the story. A man was married to a Jewish man, was married to a non-Jewish woman in the past, and they had a daughter. And now this man is has a responsibility, at least in civil law. He has to provide for this family, for this girl, his biological daughter, but she's not Jewish. So he's buying a tray for food for her. This is a Kashanai not from England, it's from another country. And of course, we know that kosher food is more expensive. And someone challenged him and said that you're not allowed to buy non-kosher food, even to provide for God. So here you have on the screen, we've perhaps gone through this before. So we have a Issa Schoira. A Jew is not allowed to trade in Dvorim HaAsurim if they're also in a Torah. So that's what you have here from the Mechaber. Kol dov shosim in a Torah, afa bishemuta behanoir, imudov hamyuchid lemachon. If it's designated for food, for if human consumption, also lasses beschere. So I'm not allowed to make a business of selling pork, etc. Well, then there are more ads, oil halvis olov, to use it for pawns. I'm not going to that. I'm not familiar with that culture. Meanwhile, va'afilu leknoise la'achilu lepoyalov oivde kechovim osu. So the Ramah is saying, just like you're not allowed to buy and sell chazer, or food which is also in a Torah, well, it can be neveils the Torah, it's also in a Torah. So too, you wouldn't be allowed to buy it to feed your workers. So you've got goyish workers, and you have to provide them lunch and supper. So you shouldn't buy chazer for your workers. So that's the position of the Ramah. The Shach on the spot challenges this, and he says when you're buying it in order to give it as a gift to a goy, may be possibly seen as buying to sell to a goy. But if you're buying to feed your workers, if you have at home, mashma de shori. It's actually mashma. That is allowed. The ein ze kein schayra. It's not. It shouldn't be seen. It's not. It's not like you are the middleman taking from A and passing on to C, which would be the case of schayra. Here, you're buying it to feed your workers. It's not going anywhere else. Anyway, he says it doesn't see that as schayra. He further quotes the Ataz Zov, otherwise known as the Lavush. The Lavush has got his sefer is divided into 15, I think 13 titles, and his name was Ramot Chayafa. So he called his Levushim, the names of the Mordechai Yotzim Melchni HaMelech, Levush Malchus, Tcheles V'chur, Vatez Zohar Gdela. So his various sections are the various garments which Mordechai Tzaddik was wearing when he was led by a Haman Rosh. Kol ponim v'chein kosav ha'ataz ve'lehedya, yesh oimrim shemuta likach chazerim, and would be allowed to buy pork, lahachil lepoyalim ev'rechavim, to feed your non-Jewish workers. Then he says v'yesh oisim, and that's the position of the Ramah. True. So there is, according to Ramah, possibly it's not okay, but there is certainly mokim lahat here. He shouldn't have to start forking out extra money to feed his non-Jewish dependent with kosher food. Right. Next question, or a fairly simple question. What do you, where this is a shaila from a country where they don't have a shochet, I guess they import their kosher meat. So she's asking, we have a choice either to do kaparas with money or to do with fish. Is there preference to do with fish rather than money? So my reaction was to use fish. But then I checked it up and I saw indeed that this is what the Niti Gabriel writes, the same thing. He says if you don't have the option to use a bird for kaparas, use other animal living beings, live beings. It's the fish has to be live fish, yeah? Can't take one from the freezer. It says with live fish, and if that's not available, then you'll use money. And then you have the Lashon Zeh Kesef Yelech Litzedakah. Why is fish a preference over money? So he says, he quotes here from various sources. Ella from Mog is a commentary on the Mate Ephraim. Geen noegim bismanenu harbe loim de Torah likach dogim lekaparis. Baal Chaim, living creatures, have got precedence to money. Ki minig hamois lo nizka berishonim rag b'chayodom. So the minig kaparis is mentioned, go back early Rishonim, very early, but 700-800 years ago. but use of money is not mentioned. Back in only the Chayyadim. It's interesting. So now he uses a lotion. If you use money, you say the word Zeh HaKesef Yelech Litzaka. Now in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch with Chabad Minhagim, so we have here a note that one who cannot do kaporas with a chicken should use money according to the value of a bird, and instead of saying Zeh HaTarnago Yelech Lemisa, you'll say Eila HaMois Telachon on its tzedakah. Now this is interesting. I'm just bringing it out of not la halacha, but the interesting comparison, where you have the Zeh HaKesef Yelech Litzedakah, and the same thing is said in different words, Eila HaMois Telachon Litzedakah. Where did we get that from? Some who are my age or older will remember those yellow little booklets, which we used for Hakofas. These are booklets which were published by Merkez Linyon Chinuch back in Tofshin Gimel. I have one from Tofshin Hey or something. But these are thin booklets, I don't know, 8 pages, whatever. And it was all retypeset in America by Schlesinger Brothers. And there it has this text. So we have a Chabad Sefer printed in Rantov Gimel, as they say, which has a nusach, Elo HaMois Telachon on Litzedakah, and that's different to the nusach, which is more well known, Zeh HaKesef Yelech Litzedakah. And one can speculate where these changes came from, but okay, let's move on. So here I got the following shayla. Lubavitcher man is a shliach and Alamdin and Chassidus She'id, and so he's davening Musaf. So in his shul, I don't even know it's Lubavitcher shul, but he's being honored with being the Tkiyas de Mu'umid, the Baal Tekiyah for Tkiyas de Mu'umid. So that someone else is doing the 30 Tkiyas before Musaf, someone else, and he does doing Shemoneh Esrei. But sometimes he's taking his time on his Shemoneh Esrei, taking longer than the Tzibur. But he's about the Baal Tekiyah. So it comes at some point, a Gabe bangs on the bimah, on the table, and so because they're blowing the quiet Shemoneh Esrei. So he's not holding the Bichlal. So he starts where he is, and he blows shofar. And can sometimes be that it comes for Chazar Sashatz, the long Musaf, and they already have finished Malchies, and he's still in Shemoneh Esrei. He's still in his quiet Shemoneh Esrei. Time to blow. So he felt that he has to blow. So this is his question. Is it appropriate for him to blow shofar whilst he's davening Shemoneh Esrei, even though he's not up to that place where it's warranted to blow shofar? That's one question. The other question was, let's say he is so behind that they are davening the Shemoneh Esrei and he's not up to it. He's behind. He's still catching up his leftovers from Shacharis. Can he blow shofar whilst for them in Tkiyas de Mu'umid and he's not even davening Shemoneh Esrei? So this second question, I felt quite confident to say that is not a problem. I don't have a mocha bebezed over haposhut that the Baal Tekiyah is not imperative that the Baal Tekiyah is davening with a minyan. This is a chiddush. It says that if a person's davening by yechidus, it says he doesn't blow in Shemoneh Esrei, and it says ein toikin loy. No one, you don't have someone else blow for you either. But that means that, in other words, that you don't have to be a Baal Tekiyah doesn't mean you're davening with that minyan. Fine. But now let's read this carefully and say, coming back to the first question, is it appropriate to blow shofar and you are not, in your middle of Shemoneh Esrei, you're not up to where the minyan is, you're not up to those pauses where Tkiyas shofar is warranted. So let's read this carefully. See, this is in Siman Tov Kuf Tzadik Beis. Hatkiyah is if yud. Hatkiyah shall say the habrachas. When it comes to this, now he's talking about in Chazar Sashat, the Tkiyas de Mu'umid, the Chazan shouldn't be the Baal Tekiyah. Why not? Shema Yizbalbel. he might get confused. He might not be able to retrace his tefillah without confusion. If he's confident that he will be able to blow shofar and then he'll be able to revert to his davening without teref das, or even better, is davening the siddur. A siddur, you have vada who muvtach, he's confident he'll be able to retrace. So then yuchal litkoya is able to blow shofar, so the chazan can be bal tefillah and bal tekeya, even if there's someone else to blow. It's just as good as him. And let's read the Lashon carefully. Lefi shehatkiya eino hefsek klal b'tefillah. Why is it okay for the chazan who's davening Shemona Esrei to blow shofar? Because blowing shofar is not a hefsek in tefillah. Why not? Say, shofar is not speaking. No, that's not the answer. The reason why it's not a hefsek is not because shofar is a different thing. If you gesture, you're not meant to gesture, but if you gesture with your hand, you wave. Is that a hefsek with tefillah? This is with your hand, and this with your mouth. So tkiya is with is blowing, and then shmonas with dibur. That's not the reason. Kivin shetzorich litkoya al seder habrachos. Since there's an institution to blow shofar al seder habrachos, in keinu tzorich hatfilah. Therefore, it's counted as tzorich hatfilah. It'll be Friday afternoon. It says in the Mishnah in the Braisa in Shabbos, sheish tkiyas token. Here's the middle of Shemona Esrei. Yeah, we need a tekiya now. Sicher nicht. That tekiya, you can't blow Shemona Esrei middle. You can't blow a tekiya middle of Shemona Esrei. What's it got to do with it? It's a hefsek. But if it's Seirich HaTfilah, so then it belongs here. Yeah. So now here's where I know you can argue both ways. I don't think it just means Seirich HaTfilah in the broad sense. At this juncture, it's called for. Because it's called for at this moment, therefore it's appropriate. It's not a hefsek, it's not a foreign body, it belongs here. Therefore it's not a hefsek. But if you're in the middle of Shimcha Hashem Elokeinu, which is not the time for blowing shofar, they have a tzorich, it's not your tzorich. So I suspect that's called it's not tzorich hatfilah. At that point, it's not called for. As far as your tefillah, it's not called for now. It's a chiddush, but it's a chiddush to fakir to say that you can blow shofar and you're not holding there. And the shayla is, what would be if there's no one else? If there's no one else who can blow, because the Pashi say, give someone else to be doing the tkiyas. Was it after? If there's no one else, then there's room to be mekel, as you have a parallel, because the Alter Rebbe here is quoting from the Mogen Avram in Siman Tov Kuf Pei Hey, and he makes comparison with a kohen, with a chazan who's a kohen. Can a chazan who's a kohen step away from the Omid and turn around to face the tzibur to do bichas koyanim? So this, and here, if there are no other koyanim, that seems to be bepashtus the halacha that he should do, and then someone, a Yisrael, stands up and does the makri, who prompts the kohen to say etc. But when there are other koyanim, so then this Alter Rebbe brings 2 days, whether it's appropriate for the chazan to step away from the omid and to join the koyanim. But if there's no other koyanim, then that's called for. Then that would be justified. And therefore, if there's no one else who's capable of blowing tkiyas the umid, then perhaps you could use the same logic that he should be allowed to do what he's been doing. Right. We started late because of the Tanis, and we're going to finish a little early also because it's late. Says Tshuva. Some people are getting up early for slichas. Chabad will not, but never mind. It's good for a teretz. Okay, so now, I like to show things which people may have overlooked. So we have in the it's also Rosh Hashanah, but also this is from Yom Kippur Marzes. I think it's the same Rosh Hashanah. So you have here after Kedusha. So we have Chamoil al Masecha, Sisman Masecha. Then Yem Elitzyosh, Oidis Kolon, yeah. And that's in Shachris, it's first Be'em Elitzyosh, and then Oidis Kolon. Comes to Musaf, no, it's Oidis Kolon, and then Be'em Elitzyosh. The time of boy, why is there this change? So the answer is on the page that in Musaf, after this Kedusha, we have most of the piyutim by us are leading up to Kedusha, mostly. But there's one piyut which comes up after Kedusha, and that's ha'oiches b'yad midas mishpat, which is, by the way, is mentioned l'shevach in Kisvi Arizal, not to tamper with the nusach or the piyut of ha'oiches b'yad midas mishpat. But meanwhile, because we're going to say the piyut ha'oiches b'yad midas mishpat, therefore we do a smuchin. Because it's mishpat, because you're going to talk about Biyad Midas Mishpat, therefore we have the ending to finish off Hamelcha Mishpat, which then comes back to Shachris, but we don't have this piyut of Ha'oiches Biyad Midas Mishpat. So then right of that is going to be V'chenyes Kadesh. Now, I realize now that this would be a good explanation for Nusach Sfard. It may not work for Nusach Ashkenaz because they don't say V'chenyes Kadesh, at least not in the Stila Shmona Esrei. So that I'm not sure. I didn't do enough homework on that. But because we're going to go and say V'chenyes Kadesh, therefore it makes sense. Ki Kodesh Hayoim La'adoneinu V'chenyes Kadesh. So the Kodesh and Kodesh are smuchin zeloseh. So that's a svara. I know that in the Nusach Ashkenaz don't say V'chenyes Kadesh in regular Shmona Esrei, in regular, but someone Chazos Hashasha comes in. But that's as much as I remember on the moment. Okay. The next thing which I'm going to have is a preamble. It's how do you say a rehearsal for Shabbos. Shabbos Shuva Dafne Zoni Adarosha. And there's something which came up recently. We're learning in Shulchan Aruch, and it was like a bit of a mystery. And so I wanted to address this. So in having Siman Tov Reish Zayin, we talked about the mitzvah of vidui, and as you can see on the left of the screen, we have a lashon of a brayse. In Yuma, I think it's Pezayin, Amid Beis. Toner Rabbanon mitzvahs vidui erev Yom Kippurim im Chashecha. Mitzvahs vidui, first of all, there's a mitzvah of vidui, of confession. And the timing of this is Erev Yom Kippur im Chashecha, as it's getting dark. But Chacham say, don't leave it until then. Yisvade koidem sheyochal v'yishteh, shema titorev daite bisuda. In case he'll get confused. I just noticed when we read before, a couple of slides back, it talked about tiruf das, if the chazanim will get confused. So here, the Brisa says, why should, because he's having a meal, he might get confused because of the meal, and therefore don't rely on im chashecha, do vidui earlier at mincha. It's rather koydem sheyochal, which means at mincha you have your dam mincha before Sodom Mafsekes, koydem sheyochal v'yishtem. And then he says further, yeah, if you said vidui koydem sheyochal, also yeah, even though you had vidui earlier, but then you should also say vidui again. And here he says, why should you say vidui again? He says, Shema Eira Dvar Kakola Bisuda, in case something went wrong during the meal. Now, what went wrong during the meal? What could have gone wrong? So Rashi says, Dvar Kakola Shel Chet. It could have been he incurred an Aveir, and therefore he says vidui again, Im Chashecha. Then Mikbar continues, even though he said vidui Arvis, he says again Shachris, again by Musaf, Mincha, and by Ne'ilah. It doesn't say why. I'm going to jump ahead. I'm going to share with you the nusach of this brayse as it appears in the Rif. Sorry, I couldn't fit everything on the screen, so we're going to have to go back and forth perhaps a bit. Ton Rabbonon mitzvahs vidui erev Yom Kippurim im chashecha. Yeah, that's the same. Divrei Reb Meir. So these are the words of Reb Meir, which is not mentioned in the Gemara. Chacham Eimrim tzorich she'izvade koidem she'yochel v'yishte. Chacham say, make sure before you have your meal. Shema yere dvar kalkolo bisudose. Did you notice the difference? Before it was Shema in the Gemara, the Brisa said Shema titorev daite. Here he has Shema yere dvar kalkolo bisudose. And he says, even though you said vidi earlier, before you ate, you say vidi again after you ate. Ve'afal pishis vada arvis, again shachris and minche and musif and minche ne'ilah. All right, that's as much as we have. Otherwise, they seem to be the same. But the only difference which I noticed is he uses, instead of titor of daiti besuda, he has shem yera dvar kalkola besudas. Okay, fine. Now, in the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, he brings a first opinion and that is that the time for vidui is at nightfall. The second opinion, which is the Ramban, that is before nightfall. Im chashecha means as the sun is about to set. That's the posture. Any you read the Sifim, that's clear. We've got two opinions whether the prime time for vidui is im chashecha banacht, already by nightfall, or im chashecha just before nightfall. The words im chashecha does allow for interpretation both ways. But there's a few diyukim, which are waffen sich in die Gegend, very noticeable. In the first opinion, he says, since Yom Kippur is a Yom Slicha v'Kapara, it's a day of forgiveness. And just like when you bring a korban, you meant to say, I have vidui with the korban, because a korban is atoning. A korban is a boy and lachab is coming to atone. So Slicha, so Yom Kippur is also coming to atone. So just like when you bring a korban, v'hisvadas chatosim, you have to confess. So too for Yom Kippur. So I mentioned before mitzvahs vidui. The Brisa is a mitzvahs vidui. Where does it say there's a mitzvah of vidui in Yom Kippur? So the first loshen, the Alter Rebbe first opinion says, doesn't say mefurish, but since it's known that Yom Kippur is called it's a Yom Kippurim, it's a day of atonement, and atonement is associated with confession. But now let's take a look at Siv Beis. He says, Mrs. Vidi Minadin, Bikoidem Zmanas Chals Kapora, Kadesha Yichnas L'Yoim B'Tshuva. So it's changed. Here, the first opinion says that the mitzvah of Vidi has got to do with Kapora. The second opinion says that mitzvah Vidi has got to do with Tshuva. Two separate things. Then towards the end of the Siv Beis, he has another line. In addition to having said vidui as the night is coming on, also you have to say again during the day, veloshu b'tshuva shleima. So now we have the first opinion talks about kapara, the second opinion says shuva and shuva shleima, complete shuva. So we've got now interesting diyukim. Then a couple of other things. It says now the facts are fairly similar, yeah? That mitzvahs vidui should really be mishat echshach, but Chacham were concerned shema yera dvar kalkolo shel shichrus, yeah? So this is what I picked up, that the Alter Rebbe has changed from the Lashon HaGemora, shema titoref daite, he uses dvar kalkolo, okay, so that's the nusach of the Rif. I don't have any deeper insight in that. But what's the worry? He'll become drunk. He'll have a bit more l'chaim at the Suda Mafsekes, and he won't be able to say vidui at nightfall. Therefore, he should say it before davening mincha. And here, the Alter Rebbe in the second opinion also says, Shema yera le'dvar kakola besuda, uses the lotion of the Brisa in Erif. He doesn't spell out shel shichrus. I don't have an answer why he doesn't mention shichrus. Perhaps he's relying on the first time. Then he says, back to the first opinion. He said vidui by mincha. But then, even so, he should say vidui again after nightfall. Be'arvis. Shehu haschol zman kapora. Because that's the prime time. So really, the prime time for vidui would have been after nightfall. You said it earlier because before by mincha, in case you get shikah. But it comes the prime time, so you should say it then. So then we have twice. One by mincha shema yishtakir, one after night by ma'ariv, because that's ikas banavidui. And then, even though you said at ma'ariv, you say again at shachris. Why at shachris again? So now you have a third reason. Shema eira lidvar aveire acha havida shel arvis. In case after ma'ariv you incurred a sin, and you have to therefore say vidui again by shachris, again by mincha, again by nila, by musaf, by nila. Now let's see how this is presented in the second opinion. It says you say it before mincha in case you have a mess up in the meal. Fine. And then he says, even though you said vidui at mincha, you say imcha shecha. You say again as the sun is about to set. It says later, when you see the sun setting, you say vidui. Why do the second time? Shema Eiro Leidvar Aveiro. Wait a second. The first opinion said, why do you have to say it again by Ma'ariv? Because who ikazman havidui. So why does he have to say Shema Eiro Leidvar Aveiro Achamincha? Say simply because that's ikazman havidui. This is the second diuk. Then he goes further. You said vidui at Chashecha. And then choize misvade, ma'ariv, and shachris, b'chol tfilas hayom. Why? So the first opinion said, why do you have to say again by shachris and by musaf and by mincha and by neila shem eir ledvar avera b'chol hayom? Here he doesn't say that. Here he says the fee in addition to the prime mitzvah, which is to say im chashecho. In addition to that, my avidui, certainly, in addition to the vidui, which is at the onset of Yom Kippur, there's a mitzvah really on Yom Kippur. So very, very confusing. You got all of these diukim. I think we've had 4 diukim on so far, and just try to answer them all with one explanation, and that is the following. And this is based on the Sikh of the Rebbe in Chelik. I have it on this. No? This is Chelik Yud Zayin, Pashas Shmini. There's vidui and there's vidui sholem. There's tshuva and there's tshuva shlema. The Gemara says, if a person says, Aval avnachnu v'aveseinu chotasi, vidui. Then we have, chotasi, yavisi, pashati, going to detail. So there is a very basic vidui, and then there's a shleimus havidui. And then it comes to tshuva, it can be, all right, I have remorse. But then there's a tshuva shlema. And kapora is associated with tshuva shlema. So there's tshuva, I'm sorry, that doesn't fix the broken window. Kapora fixes the broken window. That requires a further level. It's not just chotasi. Chotasi, all right, you're contrite, but only when it's a vidui sholem and a tshuva shlema, then there's kapara. Okay, very good. So now let's deal with therefore the first point. What is being said in the first opinion? Mitzvahs vidui is a offshoot of kapara. Since we're talking about Yom Kippur, it's a day of atonement. Therefore, atonement has to be with a vidui. What does atonement mean? Tshuva shlema. That belongs on Yom Kippur. Yeah, richtig. On Yom Kippur, it's a day of kapora. Therefore, it's a vidui. It means a vidui sholem. Chatos yavisi pashat. And with tshuva shlema. The second opinion, with Shita of Ramban, is saying, no, the mitzvah of vidui is hascholas avid, vidui, pashta vidui, and that's Erev Yom Kippur. Erev Yom Kippur is not Yom of Kapora yet. You're not up to Kapora. It's just the Indian of tshuva. Fine. So kadesh yichnes the Yom b'tshuva. Then he says, but yeah, there is a vidui, a pashta vidui. That's Erev Yom Kippur. But bevadai, during Yom Kippur itself, for sure there needs to be vidui because you want to reach to tshuva shleimo and vidui. So that great a more shleimus dike vidui that will bring it to tshuva shleimo. And does zoktet himself that in addition to having said vidui im chashecha chayzo misvade lefishe bevadai gam b'yom kippurim chayiv atzmi chayiv disvades. Yeah, the svara which it says kapora warrants is a vidui. That's a vidui sholem. For sure, Yom Kippur needs to have further vidui. V'losha v'tshuva shleima. Fine. The first opinion doesn't see it that way. I'm not totally clear. But he's saying you've done your vidui and you already have kapora. If you have kapora, so why do you have to say vidui again in case you did a dvar aver? So the opinion of the Ramban is, even without a davar avera, you haven't reached your shleimus havidi, you haven't reached shuva shleimo. Therefore, there's further stages in vidui. Therefore, I don't have to bring in shema era le davar avera. Hashem came the first opinion who says that you've already reached kapora. So why are you saying vidui again? Shema era le davar avera. Now, one more diuk. He said, why does the Ramban say that vidui belongs Erev Yom Kippur? Let's read those words carefully. The time for your vidui is Erev Yom Kippur, kadesh yichnes leyoim b'tshuva v'lo yeh shehus lachtoi bein havidui la'aschol hazman ha'kapora. The vidui has to be timed that it's kind of mamish abutting in Kippur, that you should go into Yom Kippur without a chance to sin. Fine. So when it comes to, he said vidui at mincha, and here the second opinion that he brings, according to Ramban, and I asked the question, why did you have to say shehu ikas man havidui and shema eireloi? In the first opinion, he says, why do you have to say by ma'ariv ikas man havidui? So according to Ramban, you said it earlier, and now im chashechu ikas man havidui. Why did you have to add a reason shema eireloi dvar avera? The teretz is, according to the Ramban, the timing of vidui has to be that there's no chance for an avera between then and Yom Kippur. But if you said vidui at mincha, so then it's missing. Not that I don't know. It's maybe by liberty. Not davka Hashem eiro le dvar avera bepoyel. But since he said vidui at the time when there's still time to do an avera until ikas ban avidui, so then that vidui wasn't a shleimus dike because it wasn't somuch. Therefore, because of that's the reason why he has to say it again. So it's very interesting that the Shema Eirele Dvar Avere, according to the second opinion, is the reason why you have to say again Samach Lechashecha. Whereas according to the first opinion, the Shema Eirele Dvar Avere is only the reason for during Yom Kippur, but for Erev for Yom Kippur Banach, that's because Ikas Man Avidui. I know it might be complicated, and I apologize. I have it b'ksav. Someone who wants to have it b'ksav, I'm more than happy to share it with you. We have just another couple of questions, and then looks like we'll be finished on time. Oh, so last week, if you remember, we had the fellow, this Gabe, who wants to remember his people's pledges, and doesn't even know their names. Never mind how to contact them. So he asks them for their telephone number, and he's got a bunch of papers with numbers, and he puts them in a sequence of their number, and then after Yom Tov you can call them up. So now someone asked, there was two questions thrown in B'Shas Ma'aseh, and one was about Beirut. So the answer is that it has to be that all the zeros are together, and all the ones are together, and all the twos are together. So nothing has to start rummaging in a pile of all different numbers, because that taka would be a problem of Beirut. But if the numbers are each one separate, and then he just puts them, takes one by one, puts them in sequence, no question of Beirut there. But then the other question was about Hachana. So I mentioned last week that Chafotzecha Asurim Chefse Shamayim Mutar. It's Chefse Shamayim. But then I have a question to that. Are you allowed to? Chefse Shamayim is normally understood in the context of Dibur, or not so much with a mice. The Alter Rebbe brings, I think, in Tovkuf Beis about Yom Tiv, that you can't goylel the Sefer Torah from one day to the next. And even on Friday for Shabbos, you mustn't go to the Sefer Torah. And even if you made an Erev Tafshilin, because Erev Tafshilin is for food, but rolling a Sefer Torah is not food. So you can't roll the Sefer Torah so that it should be ready for the following day. And yet, you're not allowed to prepare from one day for the next, for Chefse Shamayim. So in my mind, was the Chefse Shamayim is B'maise. Melo Dibur is one thing, but if it's B'maise, you shouldn't be allowed to. So here I looked around and I saw the following. This is actually referred to in the Piskei Teshuvos. There's this Sefer Nezer Yisrael, and it looks like before the war it was like as popular as Shmir Shabbos Kilchasa. Kol Ponim, it's referred to actually Shmir Shabbos refers to it a lot. Chefze Shamayim Mutal Adaber Behem B'Shabbos. B'Shmenes Mitzvah, what you'll need for a Sudas Mitzvah. L'tzakalanim, shiluchim, you're out. Okay. Dafke ledaber, avalisker. Okay. Then he has, so you have the main, you have the pnim, and then you have the maj. So he has a very interesting observation here. That you are allowed to engage, discuss cheftze shamayim, afal pi she'ein tzorech hayoyim, but Tosfos Shabbos kosav, dafke she'yich tzorech b'dibure hayoyim, Holav hochi also afilu ledvar mitzvah ein elsif katan aleph. He comes up with a very interesting chiddush. That chefze shamayim is only permitted when it's a need to discuss it now, and it won't be able to be dealt with later. If it can be dealt with later, then you're not allowed to do it today. So that explains to roll the Sefer Torah, even though it's chefze shamayim. So what? You can roll the Sefer Torah tomorrow, so you can't roll it today. When it comes something which you won't be able to deal with tomorrow, the opportunity will be lost, then you are allowed to deal with that. If otherwise the opportunity won't be available later. And I think that would be true. That's what he quotes this in the context of the Piskei Teshuvos, in the context of the Gabbai keeping track of who pledged how much for each aliyah, etc. So it's something which is a davar ha'ovid. If you don't keep track of it now, tomorrow you won't remember, and so then that's going to be a davar ha'ovid. So that's I think answers why it's that this hachona is permitted, even though here it's a mice, it's not just dibur, but because it's something which won't be available later. Right. One last thing which is on the list but not on the screen, and that is about Erev Yom Kippur. So someone asked me, he saw in a particular guide where it said that if a man lives alone and he has to ben shlicht, so when does he say shechianu? So normally men say shechianu at Kiddush, women say shechianu when they light candles, at least in our community. Yeah? Mentioned as far. A man says Kiddush, it says shechianu at Kiddush. And it says the Gemara many times talks about Yak Nahaz. So Zman is part of the sequence of Kiddush. Also, so now the Gemara says if a The Gemara asks a question: why don't we make kiddush? We're in Erevin. Why don't we make kiddush on Erev Yom Kippur with a glass of wine? And you make kiddush, and then it'd be still early. So you can be and before Yom Tov comes in. Well, it says once you say shechionu lizman hazeh, so you won't be able to drink the wine. By saying shechionu, it becomes as if it's mamish lizman. Fine. So now here's coming back to Akka. So perhaps I mentioned this, I don't remember. If a woman needs to get into a car, she wants to get into a car after benching licht, not just a 5 minute ride to shul. So she can do that, make a tonight, but she shouldn't say shechionu at the time of she shouldn't say shechionu when she lights candles. She say shechionu after kol nidri with the men in shul. Here's the with the man. So when should the man say shechionu? Should he say shechionu when he lights candles, or should he say shechionu with all the men in shul? Now Mela Yom Tov, he's going to say with Kiddush. So the right time for Zman is by Kiddush. But on Yom Kippur, not going to make Kiddush in any case. So why should he say Shechionu later? Why can't he say earlier? What does he gain by leaving it for later? So my answer to him was that a man usually, even if like he lights candles, he's not a Kabbalah Shabbos by lighting candles. No, that's not the default position. And especially Yom Kippur, he'll want to carry his shoes to shul, his machzah to shul. If he's going to say Shechionu when he lights candles, he won't be able to carry anything to shul. He's already said Shechionu as manazeh. Therefore, it's more advisable that he should say that he shouldn't say Shechionu when he lights candles. Like this, he's not Mikabel Yom Tov, Krish Sayim. He's got up till 10 minutes because when you light, the candles have to be kind of shortly thereafter, some of them up to 10 minutes after, you have to be Mikabel Krish Sayim. So you have 10 minutes to carry to shul right after he lights candles. But in this way, he will be able to go veheter. That's the end of my shir for this evening, and thank you for joining us. I want to wish you all a Gmach Simatove and Shia Sheshnas Geula with Mashiach Tzidkenu, Meher Imenu Mamash.